here at the Capitol where we stand for the most vulnerable life, and that's innocent life. And when I talk about this issue, the idea that we need to bring this bill, Ann Wagner's Born Alive, Abortion Survivors Protection Act, when I say we need to bring this bill to the floor for a vote, the first thing people say is, how is it legal in America to kill a baby after it's been born alive outside the womb? It's shocking. It's shocking. It's disgusting. It's something that no American should stand for. And in fact, when you talk to people from every walk of life, Republicans, Democrats, independent, pro-life, and yes, even most pro-choice Americans recognize that a baby born alive outside the womb should have the full protection under law, yet it doesn't. We need to pass this law for the very reason that we see states right now, like New York, celebrating the fact that they can murder a baby after it's born alive outside the womb. It's wrong. It's not only wrong, it's murder, and it shouldn't be legal. Yeah. And so when people say, does it take an act of Congress? Why do you need an act of Congress? We shouldn't have to be here today having this discussion, but we have to stand up for those babies because it is happening in America. In fact, in many states in the nation, they don't have that same legal protection that states like my home of Louisiana have had in place for years, where we say you can't murder a baby after it's born alive. That protection doesn't exist in every state, and it's under attack. We need to make sure that this is a law consistent all across the board. Nancy Pelosi refuses to bring this bill up. But you know what? The good news is all of us here today have a message for Nancy Pelosi. If you won't bring it up, we'll bring it up. And that's what this discharge petition is about. So starting today on the first vote series at 11:30, I will be joining my colleagues, starting with Ann Wagner, in signing a discharge petition that makes it clear to everybody across the country, you can't say you're pro-life unless you sign the discharge petition to bring this bill up for a debate and a vote on the House floor. It's the only way to make it happen. But we can make it happen, even if Nancy Pelosi won't. How can you have a leader in Congress say that they think it's okay to murder a baby once it's born outside the womb? It's happening. We're here to make it stop. I applaud all of my colleagues for their leadership in starting what is going to be, I think, a movement all around the country. As people watch this debate and as momentum grows, my goal is that today we have more than 100 members of Congress sign the discharge petition on day one. And we need to get to 218, so it's going to take a national effort. But the country's watching. And you know, people say it should be easy to get 218 signatures. Frankly, it should be easy to get all 435 members of Congress to sign this. But it's not. In fact, it's going to be hard. We know it's an uphill battle. But we don't come here to do the easy things. We come here because it's hard, and we're here to do the most difficult and toughest things, and most importantly, to stand up for the most vulnerable among us. And the person leading that charge, as someone I've been so proud to work with on this issue, so proud to see help elevate this so that the country now is paying attention after they saw what happened in New York, after they heard the governor of Virginia gruesomely describe on radio how they can murder a baby after it's born alive. Our leader in this fight, Ann Wagner.
I thank my good friend Whip Scalise, Liz Cheney, Kevin McCarthy, all of our leadership that has stood with us, along with all of my colleagues and so many of you across the country and the world. We stand on your shoulders in protecting the most vulnerable in our society. I came to Congress to be a voice for the voiceless, and H.R. 962, the Born Alive Act. Today, we will finally start the process of bringing this vote to the floor, to the U.S. House of Representatives, the People's House. This is a measure that has passed with bipartisan support in the past. This is about giving life-saving care to children, to babies that are born alive. There are only 26 states that have protections for babies currently that are born alive. And many of those states, sadly, are rolling back their protections. That's why this is needed. We need to make sure that we make this a criminal offense, that we give mothers civil remedies, and that most of all, we give life-saving care to babies that are born alive. I want to thank all of you for being here, for all of your prayers, all of your support. I thank my colleagues for their tremendous support too. And I thank those brave Democrats that are going to cross the line, those that did so in the Senate and those that will do so in the House, to stand for the most important thing. This country, our Constitution, provides for life, liberty, and equal protection under the law. Our founding fathers didn't put an age limit on that. If you are a born child, you deserve the kind of life-saving protections that every person in America and beyond deserves. So I thank you all, and I now am pleased to turn things over to our leader, Kevin McCarthy.
Here he is. All right. Thanks. I want to thank Ann Wagner for her leadership. I want to thank our whip, Steve Scalise, for bringing forward this discharge petition. 25. 25 is the number of times we have asked on the floor in the chamber to save children who are born alive and survive an abortion. 25 times is the number that we've heard no from the Democrats leading the House. Today it all changes. Today no longer can those who belong to Congress hide behind the Democratic leadership and say they did not have the opportunity to vote because whoever holding the gavel denied the ability for the bill to come up. For those to know that a discharge petition simply needs 218 members of Congress to sign a piece of paper to allow a bill to come to the floor for a debate. Why would it have to come to this? Why would you have to do a discharge petition to save the life of a baby who survives an abortion? This isn't about Republican or Democrat. It's about life. 25 times the Democrat leadership has said no. Today that all changes. Today I hope the cameras and the reporters who sit here to listen to this talk, I hope you move from here and ask every member of Congress, will they sign the petition? Because they got elected individually, not because the Speaker protected them on what they can and cannot vote for. They have the power themselves to decide whether we can debate this on the floor. They cannot hide from anyone else. They have to take a position. And that is what we're doing today. I now would like to call up an individual that has helped so much in saving life, Melissa Odom.
Melissa.
Come on up.
I just want to thank all of the members here today for your incredible leadership. Of course, Representative Wagner from my home state of Missouri. Missouri strong. You know, I've heard that argument so many times in the last couple of months is the Born Alive Act even necessary? Of course, we know that it's necessary when we see aggressive abortion legislation being swept across our nation. But of course, I also know that this is important and necessary because I am one of the children who deserve to be protected by the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. In August of 1977, my biological mother, as a 19-year-old college student, had a saline infusion abortion forced upon her against her will. That type of procedure involved injecting a toxic salt solution into the amniotic fluid surrounding me in the womb. The intent of that toxic salt solution was to poison and scald me to death from the outside in. Typically, the procedure lasted about 72 hours, but my medical records that actually document the abortion that I survived indicate that I soaked in that toxic salt solution for 5 days. 5 days before I was ultimately born alive, accidentally. I was not expected to be born alive that day, and I wish I could tell you that when I was born alive, everyone saw my humanity and immediately provided me medical care. But I can tell you this is not how it usually happens. My adoptive parents were told years ago that I was laid aside there at the hospital. Those words were expanded on just a few years ago when a nurse contacted me directly. She was working in the neonatal intensive care unit that day at St. Luke's Hospital in Sioux City, Iowa. She said, "I'll never forget it. The door came flying open and this tall blonde nurse rushed you in." She shouted, I'll clean up the language a little bit. She shouted, "That darn Dr. Kellberg messed up." That was my abortionist. But she went on and said, "She just kept gasping for breath. She just kept gasping for breath, and so I couldn't just leave her there to die." That nurse did something incredible that day, something that so many people now think is unthinkable, to provide me medical care. My life never should have been left in the hands of my abortionist that day. My life never should have been left to the luck of the draw who was working that day at the hospital. I am so blessed to be alive, to have survived, but that day I was one of the lucky ones. I am here today with two other abortion survivors, Claire Colwell, who is a twin abortion survivor, and Gianna Jessen, who survived also a saline infusion abortion. Give them a round of applause. But we are not alone in this. I work with abortion survivors through the Abortion Survivors Network. At this point, we've had contact with 281 abortion survivors. Most survivors will not share their story publicly with the world because this is what we are facing in our country, right? People are saying we don't exist, or we're irrelevant, or we don't deserve medical care, or we don't deserve protection under the law. And so I'm here today to stand alongside members of Congress to say, give us the basic dignity we deserve. Give us health care. It is a right. We fought for our lives in the womb. Do not make us fight for our lives once again when we're born alive. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you.
Dr. Rowe. Someone who's delivered a lot of babies himself, Dr. Phil Rowe, our colleague.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Leader and Ann, and thank you all. My previous life, I'm an obstetrician. I've delivered around 5,000 babies. Put those babies in mothers' and dads' arms and single mothers' arms. And I find it absolutely unbelievable and unthinkable that we would not provide health care for a baby born alive. I cannot tell you the number of patients that are premature babies, and we've gone to extraordinary circumstances to save those children's lives. I saw a young patient just about 3 weeks ago who was in her mid-30s with a metastatic melanoma, stage 4, who was 6 weeks pregnant. She was praying that she could get that baby to 29 weeks so it could live. I see this all the time. And I cannot thank the women behind me who survived these abortions, who are willing to stand up and say what they've said. You cannot believe how important that is. So thank you, ladies, so much for what you've done. Look, I could not believe, I was doing a national television interview when they told me about what the governor of Virginia had said. I honestly could not believe that a doctor would say anything like that. He has an MD degree, but I can assure you he is not a doctor. I have fought for life my entire life, and Ann, thank you so much for bringing this to the attention, because I don't think the American people believe that in America this could actually happen. It's hard to believe. It's going to cease, and every person with a moral conscience needs to go to that building today and sign up this discharge petition. Lastly, it's time for our Democratic colleagues. Let's forget whether this is Republican or Democrat. This is about a human being, and we as a country, it defines us. And if we cannot change this definition, we will cease to be blessed by God Almighty.
Yes. Amen to that. Amen to that. And Christina Francis.
Christina Francis is next.
Pro-life OBGYN.
That's right. Good afternoon. I'm here today to represent a coalition of more than 30,000 physicians nationwide, including the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs, who are calling for the House to not only vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, but to vote yes. This common sense bill should have unanimous support. It protects the most vulnerable citizens of this country, newborn infants. The place of their birth should be irrelevant, whether they are born in a hospital or an abortion facility. All infants who are born alive should be treated with the medical care appropriate for their gestational age, not left on a cold table or in a bucket to die. As an OBGYN, when I am in a delivery room, I have 2 patients I'm caring for, mom and baby, and it is my duty as a physician to give both of them optimal care. This is the duty of any physician. We are healers, not killers. More than 15,000 abortions occur each year beyond 20 weeks, and while we don't know exact numbers of how many of these babies are born alive during these abortions, we know that it does occur. With viability now pushing 22 weeks in many medical centers, it is reasonable to conclude that many of these babies that are simply left to die could survive with appropriate medical care. I, along with many in this country, was appalled when I heard Governor Northam, a physician, say that it was appropriate to have a discussion as to whether or not an infant would be given basic medical care. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is infanticide, pure and simple. And it is antithetical to who we are as a country and who we are as physicians. I and the more than 30,000 physicians that I represent would like to thank Congresswoman Wagner for introducing this crucial bill and Whip Scalise for boldly filing the discharge petition on it. We also call for members of the House to sign the petition so that we can finally have a vote on it, a vote that should be bipartisan and unanimous. Opposing infanticide is something that should unite us all. And now I will hand things over to Representative Hartzler,
the chair
the great
of
state of
our
Missouri.
Values Action Team.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Boy, I am honored to stand here today arm in arm with my colleagues, with these abortion survivors, with these doctors and physicians who truly save lives and care for women in supporting that everybody gets medical care, including our premature infants. The lives of our country's youngest and most vulnerable newborn babies are in jeopardy. I find this preposterous. Today, one premature baby is provided with the best care available, and another infant is left to die. Or worse, and we know this has happened, the healthcare providers deliberately take the life of the child. All children, no matter the circumstances surrounding their birth, deserve immediate care and medical attention. And that's what the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act does. It simply ensures equal treatment for every baby. This is something that we can all agree on. Every living, breathing child deserves appropriate and immediate medical care. This is about decency, fairness, justice, and hope. Doing what is right for these children and their mothers. And I urge every single one of my colleagues in the House, Democrat and Republican alike, to sign the Born Alive Discharge petition. Every child deserves the right to life. And now I turn it over to Jill Stanning.
When I heard Governor Northam, a pediatric neurologist, describe during that interview, was mentioned so many times today, the process by which doctors determined to shelve unwanted babies to die, it became painfully close to me as an issue. He said, and I'm quoting, "If a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered, the infant would be made comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired." Governor Northam was right. That is exactly what happens. I know because I cared for a dying infant who was on the other side of that decision. My experience was 20 years ago, but as Governor Northam made clear, it could have and probably did happen only yesterday. I was a registered nurse at Christ Hospital in Illinois when I discovered the hospital was involved in late-term abortions, and sometimes babies survived their abortions, and if they survived, they were shelved to die in the hospital's soiled utility room. One night, a nursing coworker was taking an abortion survivor to the soiled utility room to die, and when she told me what she was doing, I couldn't bear the thought of this suffering child dying alone, and so I cradled and rocked him for the 45 minutes that he lived. He was between 21 and 22 weeks old. He was about the size of my hand, and he didn't move very much because he was using all of his energy attempting to breathe. And I remember toward the end of his life, I couldn't tell if he was alive or not unless I held him up against the light to see if I could see his heart beating through his chest wall, because their skin is so thin at that age. And after he was pronounced dead, we folded his little arms across his chest. I tied them together with a little string. I wrapped him in a shroud, and I took him to the morgue, where we took all of our dead patients. The word comfortable, which Governor Northam used, is particularly grating. How far will doctors go to comfort themselves for letting abortion survivors die, for abandoning them? After I went public, the hospital created the comfort room, so no longer could nurses take babies to the soiled utility room to die. They now took them to the comfort room. There's nothing comforting about abandoning a little baby to die. Clearly, little abortion survivors desperately need Congress to pass the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act to provide them with legal medical protection and not leave open the decision whether they live or die. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Smith.
Representative Chris Smith from New Jersey, a true leader who's fought for the unborn.
And thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership on this human rights legislation that will seek to end violence against children at the earliest stages, right after birth. So thank you, Ann, for that tremendous leadership, and to our Republican leadership for really making this human rights cause a center issue of our party. We are reaching across the aisle, asking that our Democratic colleagues see that this violence against children must end. Let me just point out very briefly, in a Florida abortion clinic, a woman named Clonia Williams delivered a live baby, a baby girl, at 23 weeks. The clinic owner took the baby, who was gasping for air, cut her umbilical cord, threw her into a biohazard bag, and put the bag in the trash. That is what is going on in abortion mills all over this country. There are only 6 states currently that report, so there has been a lack of information about how many survivors there have been, because they're not reporting. Now, why, you ask, this lack of reporting? Why the cover-up? 4 decades ago, Dr. Willard Cates, who was the head of the abortion surveillance unit at the Centers for Disease Control, probably summed it up at best when he said, live births are little known because organized medicine, from fear of public clamor and legal action, treats them more as an embarrassment to be hushed up than a problem to be solved. It's like turning yourself into the IRS for an audit. What is there to gain? The tendency is not to report because there are only negative consequences. How selfish is that? That the abortion clinic operators and the doctors, so-called doctors that do these gruesome procedures, are more worried about being embarrassed and dire circumstances rather than the life and the vitality of that little child. Let me just say that this legislation really needs to be passed, and passed now. There are kids surviving. The ability to save children at an earlier and earlier age is getting better with each and every week, month, and year. And again, we have 3 people here, 3 wonderful survivors who are here to bear testimony and witness to the fact that they could have been helped, others like them could have been helped if this legislation, Ed Wagner's bill, was law. So we need to pass it, and I ask you in the press, tell this story. So often, Jenna Jessen was at a press conference we had decades ago, told her story, a lot of press showed up, and nobody covered it. Please, it's time. The time has come to tell this horrific story, but also the remedy, which is this legislation.
All right. Let me see, who do we have next? Representative Roger Marshall is next on deck.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. For such a time as this, we've been called. The members of Congress behind me, the students beside me, nurses, physicians, abortion survivors, we've been called. We've been called to turn this country back into the right direction. I'm so grateful for every day for some 25 years I was able to deliver a baby in rural Kansas. And never in my dreams when I came to Congress 3 years ago did I think I'd be fighting harder to save babies' lives here in the halls of this Capitol than I had to in the delivery room. If I could share one quick story from my residency days at an inner city hospital in South Florida, I was called to the emergency room late one Friday night and walked into a room and saw a patient with half of her blood on the table beneath her. And as I had one nurse shoving in a 14-gauge IV in one arm and I was shoving one in the other arm, I asked the people in the room what happened. Why is this lady bleeding to death right before my eyes? And I'd been told that she'd had an abortion procedure done across town. When they were delivering that fetus, that baby, they dislocated the arm. And the arm happened to be come out first. And when they saw the arm, they said, oh my gosh, we guessed the age of this baby wrong. It's beyond 24 weeks and it can survive. Now that baby was delivered en route. We were able to save the mom's lives, but the baby not so much. For such a time as this, we're here to right the wrong. And I need people's help. I need people who are listening to this press conference to call their congressman, to call any congressman from their state. We need 21 Democrats to sign this discharge petition. So I'm asking people who are listening to contact their own congressman. You can go to my website, my Twitter, you can go to the WHIP's website, and you can get the information how to find your Congress. But today, it's a call to action. And tonight, I hope this nation will get down on its knees and turn its eyes back to the God of our forefathers who gave this country direction. It's time to right the wrong. It's for such a time as this that we're gathered to sign this discharge petition. Thank you so much.
Amen.
I think we can open it up to questions, Whip's what they told me to do next.
So in about an hour, I'll be using this pen to file the discharge petition. And I'm happy to loan it to any member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, who wants to be a part of what ultimately can be a life-saving opportunity where members of Congress literally can save lives. It's not often you get that opportunity, but today starts that process. Let's break 100 today. Let's get over 218 signatures and bring Ann Wagner's bill to the floor for a vote. With that, we'll be happy to open it up for questions.
With apologies for bypassing the moral dimensions and going straight to the political procedural issues here, this kind of proceeding for you puts you in the unusual position of whipping the opposition, in essence. And I wonder if you could give us some insights into how your suasion effort will unfold with other members from the other side.
Well, first of all, I've already spoken to some Democrats who support this legislation, have signed on as co-sponsors to Ann Wagner's bill, and who are considering signing the discharge petition. And again, I recognize that this is an uphill fight. And that's okay. We made it up to the top of this hill on Capitol Hill, and we're going to keep pushing. I know a thing or two about fighting uphill odds, but I also know how important it is. And so as I continue to reach out to Democrats, and all of us do, there are issues that transcend politics. And we pass bills all the time that are bipartisan that don't get a lot of coverage because it's not the big partisan fights. This should be one of those issues, but there's something bigger happening. There is a public uprising against the process of murdering babies once they've been born alive. And so the whole country is going to be watching this process, this debate, and ultimately they're going to be watching that list of signatures. And they're going to say, is my member of Congress one of the ones who have signed on? And if they're not, this is open to the public. This is going to be something you can go online every single day, and it'll be updated regularly. You'll be able to find out who has signed and who hasn't. And so I do think the country is going to be getting involved on a grassroots level in a way that they rarely do, because this issue is so unifying, and so the idea that a baby can be born alive and still murdered in America is so outrageous that I think the country is going to rise up.
And the whipping is going to come from the American people. These are human rights groups.
Speak to the next.
These are human rights groups. These are pro-life groups. These are people of faith. These are doctors, teachers, workers throughout my district that have a list of members of the Congress that they're going to be contacting on a daily, hourly basis, I hope, to encourage them to sign this discharge petition that Steve Scalise so bravely put forward and has fought for 25 times with unanimous consent. Today is the day, and I think the American people, certainly back in Missouri's 2nd Congressional District, are going to hold their members of Congress accountable.
All right, any other questions? Thank you all for coming. We'll see you on the floor.
No.
All right. Good job.
We quit, do you?
Great job, man. Thank you.